Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to this Hustings event for Bethnal Green Bow constituency. I'd like to thank everyone who came here joining this hosting. We have citizens from across the borough who turned up to understand and probably pose questions to the candidates. I'll quickly introduce the candidates that we have here. We have independent candidate Mr. Ajmol Masroor. Thank you for joining us. We have the conservative candidate Charlie Chirico. Thank you for coming. And we have Elaine Bagshaw. She's actually representing our colleague Mr. William Dyer, who could not be here. Before we actually go into beginning the program, I would like to offer on behalf of Campaign Against Racism and Hate Crime our sympathy to the victims of last night's barbaric attack on innocent Londoners. And we will also like to express, initially we thought, should we go ahead, and then we decided actually we should go ahead. We should not be silenced by such act, and rather probably it's important that we have this debate now, because on the back of such event, many crimes, hate crimes and racism cases place as well. So without going into further allowing those terrorist acts to dominate our event, we'll actually try and focus on our local issues. I'll quickly introduce the organization. This Hustings event is a campaign, as you can see, campaign against racism and hate crime. It's been active from last couple of years, and it has championed many of the causes whenever there was an incident within Dyer Hamlet specifically. This is a citizens community-led campaigning organization. So we are not any, we do not have any party political position. And so one of the key focus tonight will be actually how the candidates will be addressing such issues. Without further ado, I'll quickly go, and I'll probably give allow the candidates to speak for 2 minutes to just tell the audience a bit about themselves. And I'll say be as informal as you can, because we understand politics has almost become a bit like choreographed business. So one thing we'll probably try and do here, be as frank and as informal as you can. We'll probably start with the Liberal Democrat candidate here, Elaine Bagshaw.
Thank you. So first of all, apologies from Will Dyer. Will works in the party's central office, so he's preparing for the final 4 days of the campaign. So you have to put up with me instead, I'm afraid. So my name's Elaine Bagshaw. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate for Poplar and Limehouse, which is the bottom half of Dyer Hamlets. I've lived in the area for nearly 5 years. I spent 6.5 years working at the Financial Conduct Authority, so supporting the regulator in taking on companies like Wonga that were targeting very vulnerable individuals in some of their practices and helping to stop that from happening. I have been campaigning in my community for quite a long time with some success. So I live near the Limehouse Canal. There's a lot of graffiti there that you might have seen, a lot of antisocial behaviour. The graffiti will be getting cleaned up after the summer, thanks to some of the work that we've done. So yeah, that's a bit about me. Only person in my family to have been to university. I grew up in Nottingham, and my mum was pregnant with me at 17, was told that keeping me would be the biggest mistake she ever made. So I was brought up in very difficult circumstances. It was things like opportunities through education that really changed my life and mean that I'm able to sit here and talk to all of you and run for Parliament. And the reason I got into politics was to make sure that other people got those opportunities, because I was really lucky. And in 2017, it shouldn't come down to luck. It should be about how talented and able you are as an individual, rather than just who your parents are and where you are able to grow up. So
could you tell us probably a bit more about William, as well, as he's the candidate?
A bit about Will.
Since he's not here, I mean.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So Will lives in Bethnal Green Bow near Mile End. He's actually just finished his final year at university. So he's had quite an intensive couple of months. He grew up in Reigate. What else do I know about him? We've been friends for 2-3 years, and we've worked on a number of election campaigns together. So we were on the 2015 campaign together. He's a really committed campaigner, generally has a very good heart. If you give him something to do or a cause that needs to be fought for, he is the person that will go out and do what needs to be done to make sure that things are achieved for people.
Thank you. We'll probably move into Charlie Chirico, the Conservative candidate. Welcome.
Thank you. Salam alaikum. Yep, my name's Charlie. I started out my career as a criminal defence solicitor on Aldgate High Street. So I've spent a lot of my time working in criminal defence, standing up for people's rights. I got into that because I worked for an Islamic charity called Mosaic, which specialises in going into prisons. I worked with the prison imam, Shafiq Din, and we worked together to help offenders inside prison and also during their rehabilitation period as well. And one thing that really shocked me was the social injustice of having Muslim men, particularly young Muslim men, overrepresented in prison. Now that society has failed them in that sense in itself. I then moved over to be a Crown prosecutor with the Crown Prosecution Service. So for the past 4 years, I've been standing up for victims of hate crime. I was a hate crime lead. I was also the District Crown Prosecutor for Surrey and Sussex. I also worked with the Crown Prosecution Service in London. So I've seen hands-on the effects of victims of hate crime. Every day hate crime comes in all guises. It can be disability hate crime, it can be transgender hate crime, it can be racist, it can be religious. No matter what the guise of that hate crime, it doesn't just affect that one individual, it affects the community at large. I've read community impact statements out in court, I've read victim impact statements out in court, and I'm sure you can all share with me how people that are victims of hate crime, their everyday lives are affected. They change the way they walk to work, they change the way they answer their phone, they change their direction of travel in many different things of their life. And I don't think you can underestimate the impact it has on them, not just at the time of the incident, but how it then goes on to affect them for the long-term future as well. And for me, it's too late when somebody gets to court. It's too late when you're prosecuting somebody in court. The damage is already done. What really needs to be happening, and this is what I want to specifically address, because at the end of the day, we're here to address hate crime. Nothing else. It's about hate crime. This is our agenda. And at the end of the day, it's about education in schools. It's about raising awareness, and it's getting it while it's young. It's a mindset, and it needs to be flushed out of society. I am proud as a Conservative candidate to represent this diverse community, this community that has so much to offer. It's the most diverse community in London, and I'm so proud to represent it. So thank you for having me tonight, and thank you very much for the invite.
Cool. Thank you. We'll go to our independent candidate, Mr. Ajmol Masroor.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and of course coming over this evening. A lot of people would be celebrating their fast and breaking their fast, or having a good time in various parks in our borough. My basic introduction is I grew up in this area. I lived in Shadwell for 15 years. I moved around, came back to live in the same area for a longer period. I've got business, work. I've run projects and programs in the borough. I have my roots here, and I always say I have my heart often left behind, though I live literally in the outer parts of London. My parents moved there when I was younger. I have a long history in terms of work. I used to work as a youth worker first, again in Dyer Hamlets in the Arbour Youth Centre in Stepney Green. I've worked as a youth worker in different parts of the borough. I've then worked as a community organizer for citizens, again in Dyer Hamlets. I then took up a job with Newham Council as a community development advisor. I've been broadcasting, doing television and radio work since 2001. And ever since then, I've been doing that more focused work. I've made lots and lots of programs for Channel 4, for BBC, for Sky, for CNN, for others, both making them from behind the camera as well as from in front of the camera. I write a lot of commentary on social and political issues. I've become known for being a moderate face and voice for Islam in this country. I speak about many issues pertaining to Islam and the Muslims. many things I've done in life, but most important things I've done in life would probably be lobbying for social justice, equality for people, equality for all people rather than just one group of people, fighting against racism, fighting against Islamophobia, anti-Semitism. Some of those work that I've done, I'm very proud of and very happy I've done. And as we speak about hate crime, I've seen crime happening in front of me in the borough itself. Last Friday, in one day, 3 crimes I saw. 1 stabbing, 1 acid attack, and 1 near enough riot in Stepney Green. Jaminur Chowdhury, whose family lived just around the corner, who was murdered because of a knife crime. We buried him. I was there in the burial. Hate crime is on the rise, and it's going to get worse since the attack yesterday took place in London, the barbaric attack. It happened, of course, and Manchester. So we're at the forefront of it. And my promise for this coming election is to fight with the community together in partnership against hate crime, against gang, knife, and culture of violence that we see our children falling into. And finally, I do come from a very, very working class family background. My father came to this East End of London to make his ends meet. He had a factory. We come from a very poor family, actually. He lived in a council estate in Solander Gardens for a very long time. So life at the receiving end I've witnessed, and I've been serving the community for 25 years as passionately as I can, and if I am successful, I'll continue doing this.
Thank you, Ajmol.
Thank you very much.
What we'll do... in the television, I think we can do that probably towards the end of the program. What we'll do just before iftar, we will do a 1-minute silence in respect to the victims of yesterday's attack. I'll go into the actual format of tonight's program now. I have got many questions that's been given to me from the audience, and I'll probably read one by one. But before that, probably I will pose one question on behalf of the audience, is to ask you personally if you have ever experienced, like tell us probably something very personally that you have felt that you could relate, and why that personal recollection actually makes you more committed towards tackling racism and hate crime. Not just another like choreographed answer I'm after. So something very personal. It could be your family, it could be yourself, and only then probably the audience will be able to judge actually how you feel about it. We can start from Elaine.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of something that I am willing to share. So I guess for me actually, so my younger brother, he's only a couple of years younger than me, but he has a number of learning difficulties, and we were in the same school growing up, and he was bullied because of that, and it was made very clear how different he was, and that he, he wasn't able to be part of friendship groups and things like that because he was different and he was weird and he was strange. And it was really, really difficult to see that in terms of that, that was not something that was his fault. It was not a difference that he had asked for, but it was something that people used in order to target him and make him feel bad about himself, and to make me feel bad about myself as well. I mean, it wasn't something that he could change either. So I guess that in terms of events like this, it's obviously not the same and not on the same level, but it all feeds that culture of someone is slightly different from us, and therefore we will other them, and we will make sure that people know that they are, either they're the enemy or they're different.
Sure. So you have had that personal experience that you feel that you can relate to when you go into your public works?
Yeah. Relate. I know it's definitely not the same as what other people experience, but it's also being conscious of the fact that you can relate to it, but that people experience very different things depending on their different backgrounds. So it's relating, but also knowing that you need to listen to other people's experiences and what they've suffered.
Thank you, Elaine. Move to Charlie.
Well, firstly, I'd actually like to say there's a glaring gap on this stage, and it's from the sitting Labour MP, Rushna Ali. I'd like to hear the apologies as to why she's not here and why she thinks she feels she can take the grant in Bethnal Green and Bow for granted, given she has a Labour majority. It's still not right for democracy that she's not here.
Just
Moving on to
for
my
clarification on that, we did send an invite to Roshnara as well, and we've got an auto reply, probably just like many other constituents, but we'll go back to that.
Well, it's very sad we've had no reply, but moving on from that, I would like to say, yes, I have had personal experience of this. I'll give you 2 examples. A very close friend of mine in the borough of Merton is from the Ghanaian community. He is a young black male. He has been stopped more times than anybody on the roads in Merton driving in his car. And the way it makes young people feel being stopped just because of the colour of their skin and the way that they go about their time in the community is particularly isolating. But he's not alone in that, and it's about ensuring that the police and that members of the public services don't discriminate against people based on the colour of their skin. I'd also say that my own grandmother came over from the south of Italy, a very poor region from the south of Italy, as an Italian immigrant in the 1950s. She couldn't speak a word of English, and I can tell you what, we've really come on from the times in the 1950s and the 1960s when it wasn't fashionable to be half of something, when it wasn't fashionable to be Italian, it wasn't fashionable to be from a different ethnic background. My Italian father got bullied at school because his family couldn't speak English. He got bullied because he went to church every day. He got bullied because of all these things, and people in British society didn't feel that he fitted in. Nowadays, I've had a completely different experience growing up. People think it's quite exotic being half Italian. And what I would like to say is, whilst I haven't experienced that personal discrimination, I know what it's like to be a member of an immigrant family when it was really, really tough growing up in those times in the 1950s. And to this day, my grandmother still hasn't got a British passport because it cost too much money in the 1950s and she never needed to. So what I would really like to do in relation to that is make sure that the right people are integrated into this society so they feel that they belong in this society. And I'm sure it's not just the Italian community. There's a number of communities out there, particularly the older generations, that aren't properly integrated. And that's a failing of our community welcoming
Thank you,
them
Jelly. We'll
into
come
it.
into that in terms of the integration question, also the party positions. What I was after, just your personal recollection of any memory that would make you more committed towards this. Mr. Ajmol Masroor.
How long have you got?
Got only
I
2
can
minutes.
tell
you're
you,
gonna-
I can tell you many stories of personal racial and hate crime that I've experienced. One that comes to mind is when I was 6 years old, maybe even younger, and it was my first ever bike my father was about to buy me. He took me out of his house, Solander Gardens, number 46. We came out. My father's car. He came into the car, opened the passenger door, set me down, buckled me. Barely was able to walk around to go to his own seat. 2 racist thugs decided that we don't belong here, so they threw bricks on my father's car windscreen. And windscreen broke. One of the bricks landed on my lap. Glass fell on my face, and I had cut all over my face, and blood was pouring out. And I was screaming. I was very little.
It was 80s you're talking about.
Yeah, I was only 5 or 6 years old. Even earlier than that, 1975, 76.
Okay.
My father came out, of course, to my side, picked me up. I was screaming, horrified. He took me home. And you know, every time I think about it, ladies and gentlemen, I have a vivid memory of the warm blood pouring out of my face, falling onto my chest and on my lap. And memory of racism will never go away from you. The memory of being a victim of racist attack will always haunt you. And it does till this day. When I speak to you now, I feel very tearful thinking about it. There was a guy who used to live on our block, actually a lady. In my campaign trail, recently I've met her. And she was the biggest racist thug I've ever seen. She used to break our window. She used to throw dog muck at our doorstep. She used to make my life hell. And I saw her the other day when I was knocking on doors. She lives in Stepney Green now. I'm not going to give you the
your
address.
electorate.
Knocked on her door. She opened the door and she said, "Yes." I said, "Hello. I recognized you. I recognize you," I said to her. She goes to me, "I recognize you too." Then she went quiet. I looked at her and I said to her, "Do you remember what you used to do when I was young?" She goes to me, "Don't remind me of those days."
Okay.
And then she said to me, I'm very ashamed of what I've done. And then she looked at me and she goes to me, young man, I've seen your literature. I've seen your campaign leaflets. I'm very proud of you. And she closed the door and went inside. If that's a consolation, if that's an apology, I accept it. But I tell you, Ehtasham, and I tell you, my friends here and colleagues, if you have ever experienced racism, you'll never forget it. And when you experience racism now, when I do, my blood boils. Nothing makes me so angry as racism does. Racism is one of the menacing evil of our society. And now that's translating into Islamophobia. People are being discriminated because of their religion. People are being discriminated because of their belief, and that is equally an evil that we must overcome and defeat.
Thank you.
So when I walk down the road, and when I come on television, and when I receive death threats because of my faith and my religion and my beliefs, it's back down the memory lane. It reminds me of hate crime once more. We haven't defeated them yet. We have a long way to go. And it's just the beginning. We're still fighting.
Thank you, Ajmol. I just thought that this way probably the electorate will be able to relate to you more rather than just some choreographed answer. I've got many questions here. I'll take one question from Dr. Anisir Rahman. He's asking a question. Do you support free tuition fees for the university students? If not, why not? I'll only allow 2 minutes, or probably 1 minute should be enough for each person to answer the question. Shall I start from Charlie? Let's just from Charlie.
In terms of free tuition fees, I don't obviously agree with it. It's not a Conservative policy. It's Jeremy Corbyn with his magic money tree that's going to cost billions of pounds, and he has no way of funding it.
How much do you know it may cost to cover the tuition fees?
I think it was 4.5 million.
4 billion?
Billion,
Okay.
sorry. Don't quote me on the exact figure because I'm not going to say I know it off by heart, but I think it was that was a ballpark figure. If it's not, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. But what I would say is this, it is extremely costly. And to me, there are other important services that we should be prioritising spending money on, like the NHS, like our police services.
How much is the NHS spending plan?
I think it was
From your manifesto,
8
Conservative.
billion. I think it was 8 billion over the next Parliament, wasn't it?
8 billion. So you're saying that your party will be
That's what the party
prepared.
have committed to spending as per the manifesto. But your question was about whether I think university tuition fees
Yes.
should be paid for. And getting back to your question,
Yeah.
no, I don't. I think it's nice in theory. Yes. You may have a socialist heart. You may think, yes, university should be free for everybody, but the fact of the matter is, who's going to pay for it? And I went to university. I think my total cost of my degree was 12,000. Yes, I think fees have risen and they are disproportionately high, but I don't think it's about scrapping tuition fees in general. I think it's maybe decreasing them rather than scrapping them altogether. And we don't have a magic money tree just to be able to pay for all of it.
Okay. Ajmol.
Luckily, I don't have to defend the party policy of anybody, really. I can actually say very clearly that I'm really sorry. That's a really sad answer I've just heard. I'll tell you why. I enjoyed free education. And I know what education does to our children. It opens up doors and gateways for places where our children otherwise would never go. Leaving university with 27 to 40,000 pounds, that is a shame. It's a shame on the Conservative government to support it and Labour government for introducing it in the first place. So I would support scrapping it altogether. This is the one Jeremy Corbyn's policy that we should celebrate. And more, of course, but this one is amazing. I'll tell you why it's most amazing. I have 2 kids. And I would love my children to have the same opportunities that I have had. Free education. They can explore their fullest potential if they want. So I will campaign for scrapping tuition fees completely because I think it's wrong, it's unfair, and it's disproportionate. And you know what? It won't cost you and I much. You work and I work. If we all pay 1 penny to our tax, 1 penny, it's enough to survive our kids so that their education can be paid. I'm willing to pay 5 pence on my earning every time I earn. I think we should do that. We should not be selfish. We should be selfless for education, and education is the backbone of our society. So I think we should support scrapping of tuition fees all the way.
Cool. Thank you. Elaine?
So no, we don't as a party anymore. And so what I would say in
What's
terms
that
of
in your manifesto? I mean, what do you have in your manifesto?
So in the manifesto, it's a continuation of the current system. So the system that we brought in coalition has seen more people from poorer backgrounds, more people from ethnic minorities go to university than ever before. In terms of, I guess, with the debate, where I struggle is, whilst you make a good point, Ajmol, actually the issue for your 2 children is going to be living costs. So I went through university on the system for the last 2 years. It was the system where you pay your fees once you've completed your degree, and actually the issue for me
that
was
has gone up since, I believe.
Sorry?
That has gone up since when
It
you
has
went
gone
to
up,
university.
but the issue for me when I was at university was not the tuition fees. It was about how could I afford to live, to feed myself, to be able to pay for my accommodation whilst I was there. I took a gap year and I worked 4 jobs in that year so that I could afford to go to university, so that I could pay for my accommodation. I went to Birmingham. When I look at those halls now, there's no way I could afford to go. The maintenance loans, that are all loans because the Conservatives got rid of grants in the past 2 years, do not cover that cost anymore. There are the costs of your textbooks, of printing, of just having a life. So many students now have to work for the full 3 years when they're at university, and that inevitably has an impact on their education.
So are you supporting then they should not have to pay tuition fees?
No, I'm not saying it's about tuition fees. I'm saying it's about how do people cover their living costs, because their tuition fees they pay.
But doesn't it help
when they
then,
leave.
let's say, if tuition fees are paid by the government, if the government taking that initiative that, okay, we'll help you out with your tuition fees, then with your arguments, then if they're doing some extra job, that will probably help them living their life.
Well, no, it doesn't, because your tuition fees you pay once you've left. So I'm talking about the 3 years when you're at university, you have to pay to be there. So what we would do is increase the amount of money that you get whilst you're there so that you can afford to live and succeed whilst you're at university, and then the fees you would continue to pay once you'd finished.
I think Ajmol
there is
wants
something
to come
you've
in.
forgotten fundamentally, which is majority of the viewers of this particular constituency, they come from a very hand-to-mouth existence. Their living expenses and their earning are very disproportionate in the sense of what they can afford and what they can't afford. University education, while you may have thought, that's okay, I can earn a bit more and I can continue, most of the BME communities would actually opt not to go to university if they have to pay for tuition fees. That's number one. Number two, there is what we call the problem of paying interest or paying the rate of inflation. For many, that will not even touch, they will not even go there, so they will sacrifice that. And the third thing is, you and I are being Lib Dem actually broke its promise. They actually came, I remember campaigning for Lib Dems, saying no to tuition fees. Now when you broke your promise, of course you're trying to backpedal. What we need to do is look at longer picture. 20, 30 years time, our kids are going to be the taxpayers. 20, 30 years time, they're going to be our assets, and you and I are going to be pensioners. I would rather invest in my children and in my future by making education free for all children all the way to university.
I think we're clear on positions that the candidates expressed here, and we'll move into next question. Shall we start taking questions from the audience? We probably can, but do we have a mic here? I'm just worried how. If you pass the mic, could you just briefly tell us your name and your question, please?
Yes, hello. My name is Jack. I'm interested in understanding hate crime in all its forms and how you might work with all communities. And I'd like to know whether you think gay sex is a sin.
Well, I'd like to take the answer in relation to gay sex. Of course, it's not a sin. Gay marriage was actually legalised under David Cameron. I think that's something the Conservative Party can be very proud of. Any hate crime, whether it's homophobic hate crime in relation to a gay or bisexual person, is despicable, and we have to unite against that. I have actually sat on the lesbian and gay and transgender forum in the borough that I represent as a local councillor, and I can tell you now that the persecution that the LGBT community face on a day-to-day basis is as bad as racial or religious hate crime. And getting somebody like that's experienced that type of crime, they've dealt with something very difficult their whole lives. They've probably not even come out to their family, and then have to walk down the street and encounter that type of hate crime is despicable, and we need to unite against that as much as we need to unite against racial and religious hate crimes. They're all as bad as each other, and they do our community an injustice.
Thank you, Shirley. Go on, Elaine.
No, gay sex isn't a sin at all. Like that, it's weird that it's come up so much.
Your leader, party leader?
He said in the House of Commons it's not a sin. You can go and look it up.
He changed his mind.
If you want.
He initially said it was a sin, and then he changed it.
No, he
Under
never.
pressure.
No, he never
did.
said it was a sin.
Of course he did.
No, he didn't. He's never actually said that.
All right. Okay. That's fine. Don't worry. Go on.
Yeah, so he never said it was a sin, and I don't believe it is either. In terms of, I'd agree with Charlotte in terms of all hate crime is equal in terms of how disgusting it is. So it's one of the reasons as a party we support things like compulsory sex and relationships education in schools, and that includes about LGBT communities, so that young people are not growing up with this kind of very narrow view of the world. It's also why we support religious education in schools.
Just on that, do you know your local constituents' opinion on this? Like, as you can appreciate how diverse the composition of Tower Hamlets citizens, especially in your constituency as well. So what's their opinion on this? Are they quite have their opinion been taken, or if your party has done any consultation, what was the outcome?
So I haven't had anyone bring it up to me on the doorstep. In terms of the party writing the policy, the way that we write policy is we take evidence from members and also from relevant groups. So we would have spoken to groups with experience of hate crime and also education and everything else when we were drafting it. From our point of view, it's the best thing for the young person and the child to have as much knowledge as possible about different lifestyles, about different religions, partly so that they also know when a hate crime is committed against them, and also so that they know that they shouldn't be treating anyone differently just because of any facet of who they are.
Thank you, Elaine. What's your position on this, Ajmol?
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting question, because I get that often at the doorsteps that I'm knocking on a regular basis. What's your view on LGBT communities and so on? There are three very important points that we need to cover in order to answer this question well. Sorry if you can't hear me. Firstly, there are two narratives in our communities that we need to accept. We need to accept that exist. One, that there are a group of people who are from a faith community, Muslims, who have a very different view to sex than the predominant majority society, which are not of Muslim background. Very different approach to sex and sexual relationship. In Islam, if you're asking a Muslim, would be any sex outside marriage is a sin. Now, that's what Islam says. If you're a Muslim, you will not deny that, because denying that nullifies your faith. And if anybody demands that a Muslim should deny their own faith, then you are requesting a person an unreasonable request. If that's their faith, that's their faith. Secondly, there is the other discussion: is it natural or is it a choice? That discussion is raging amongst many, and I'm not going to get involved because I don't think it's a fair discussion. Secondly, third thing is, as the law of equality is concerned, nobody should ever be discriminated based on their sex, their gender, their sexuality, their ethnicity, their color. Of course, that's wrong. I stand for respecting the rights of people's choices and their rights to practice and believe or do whatever they want within our legal framework. But I am very sensitive and very aware of the faith and the issues that govern the diverse communities in which we live. And we cannot run away from that fact. So in our society, there are narratives that exist that you may not like, but they do exist. And if we live with people of faith and diverse faith, we have to respect them all. Just like I respect a person's view to have the right to say, actually, like you said, it is not a sin. You said it's not a sin. That's your view, and I respect that. There is a group of people who are 3% of our population, 3 million Muslims, and 1.8 billion Muslims of the world. They have a very different approach to sex. And I'm not here to change anyone's view. I'm just saying we need to accept that exists. The plurality exists.
I'd like to bring it down to more probably on the realistic. No,
just follow up. Muslim LGBT people exist. In fact, I was at an LGBT iftar in this borough, in your proposed constituency, just last night. and they have all sorts of stories of how they receive hate-related family abuse. Now, I understand and respect that every individual of all faiths and none make personal choices about how they conduct themselves. Right. But you cannot stand neutrally as a bystander against hatred. It may be the hatred is against a gay person, but that is but the question of whether or not you would have gay sex is irrelevant. Are you against hatred of gay people when it comes from any community? Yes or no?
I think, yeah, that was made clear from the
I
audience.
said that very
yes.
clearly, that
The
I'm against
answer
all
is
forms
clear.
of hatred. Let me
But
just
you
clarify.
said it could be a choice
Just
or
hold-
whether it's unnatural.
Would you
Do
allow-
you believe it's a choice or unnatural?
I
think
think,
you need
sorry,
to
I
chair
didn't
the
get your
program.
name. We're not gonna, we'll
But
probably
you
take
did
the
say
mic.
that. You just said it was a choice or it was unnatural. You cannot say that about a group in society. It's an unacceptable thing to say.
I think all three candidates made it very clear that no matter what are the prejudices, any hate crime they're against. So
Can I just clarify, because
go
I have
on,
the
go
right
on,
to
clarify,
defend
yeah.
myself very clearly. I didn't say that. You're misquoting me very clearly. I said there are three things I wanted to say. Number one, there are two narratives. Number two, that there are two opinions on this, and I didn't choose either of those. I just said they are. I didn't say they're my opinions. So you misquoted me very clearly. The third one is what I made very clear. I stand for everyone's rights. You see, as a Muslim, I believe that every human being is born with dignity. And I must believe that, otherwise I'm not a Muslim. This is what God says in the Quran. So I will give dignity and honor to everybody, regardless of their sin or virtue, their status, their money, their wealth, their poverty. I don't give a monkeys about who they are. What I care about is they're human being, and I must respect them, and I must give them the right, what they deserve. So I think we are together when it comes to any hate crime. Whether they have any sexuality or no sexuality is not the issue. We need to stand together against hate crime, discrimination of all sorts. But at the same time, we need to be very respectful of people's right to having views that are different to mine. That's part of diversity and plurality.
I think
That's where I stopped.
I think you made your point very clear. Thank you. We'll move into another question from one of the audience. Pappu is asking, what is your view on policing, and if elected, what changes will you make to policing? Shall we start from Shirley?
So this is about policing
Policing,
and policing hate crime. So I think one of the major responsibilities of the police, and they're doing a good job of it at the moment, we had the hate crime reduction strategy come from the Mayor's office in 2014. And what we've seen in that are free commitments. And one of the biggest things about hate crime is actually giving people who have been the victims of hate crime the confidence to actually go down to the police station and say, I have been a victim of hate crime, please support me. And the hardest...
Your government have reduced the number of policies from...
sorry?
Like community police number has been reduced because of the government cut. So...
I don't think the issue here is the number of policemen. I think it's about actually getting people who have been the victims of hate crime out from their houses and saying, look, this happened to me, please believe me.
But if, let's
The
say,
police don't ignore it when somebody comes into the police station and says, I've been a victim of hate crime. They take a statement from them.
Charlie, if there is less police station, less officers to deal with their queries, what you're going to do about it? For an example, if people are coming out of their house and their police station is closed, how is that helping? You know, that's your party position. So what do you say to that? And how, if you're elected as an MP here, what would you do about it?
Well, I don't think that somebody... I think the hardest part is actually getting the person out of the house in the first place. I don't think it's... And the police stations, they have a police station in every borough. Now, you're not telling me that there's not a police station locally that somebody can go to report a hate crime.
There isn't actually. There's only one in the borough, in Bethnal Green, and it takes ages to get there to report, and the queue is very long. Even the other day, I was a victim of crime. I wanted to report. I went there. I was told 3 hours minimum. I said, really sorry. I've got campaign time on my hand. I'm going. I left. It's because of cuts, and conservative-led cuts. Cuts have destroyed our community safety, and we need to restore that as soon as possible.
And there has been a commitment to funding the police better and increasing numbers of police by the Conservatives.
Charlie? What's the commitment?
I think Amber Rudd said that she's putting 1,900 more people into MI5, which is a security
MI5,
service which works with the police. And I'm be grateful not to be interrupted. My friend didn't answer the last question very clearly. It was a simple question. Do you think gay marriage is a sin? And he couldn't answer yes or no. So I will now take my time to respond to this question. And what I did...
So you're saying that police number will be increased?
I think more numbers do need to go into police. And Amber Rudd has also made a commitment to putting more numbers into the prison service as well. But I think the question was about what are you going to do in relation to policing hate crime?
Yeah.
And I think
necessarily hate crime.
The first problem that I said to you was in relation to reporting, that people aren't actually reporting hate crime. They're not recognising it as a hate crime. And there may be problem with officers on the ground who aren't recognising it as a hate crime as well. Hate crime itself, it's hostility against somebody for a perceived membership of a group. And actually that hostility is simply unfriendliness, and it's the way the victim perceives it. So it's making sure it doesn't just have to be reported through the police. There has to be a multi-agency approach to this. There has to be charities that work with victims of hate crime. It's not just about reporting it and taking it through the criminal justice system. We need charities working alongside the police and the local council to make sure that they get the full support that they deserve.
Who is formally responsible to deal with the hate crime reports? It's the government, right? It's the police force.
It's the police and the Crown Prosecution
That's where the question
Service.
was. Okay, we'll let Elaine come in.
Yep. So our policy on policing, first of all, is an extra £1.2 billion for the police service. That will go out kind of locally. So the borough commander in Tower Hamlets would decide what they wanted to spend their portion of that money on, whether it's extra police officers or is it community officers or community projects, to make sure that we're working together in this area. I think the biggest thing for us that we would want to do as a party, and that I would definitely be making sure we delivered if elected on Thursday, is getting rid of Prevent, which is something that has been incredibly divisive, I think, particularly in East London and in our community, in terms of building barriers between the police, diverse communities and everyone else. So we'd want to get rid of that and move to a model which is far more about the police working with communities, understanding their issues, rather than what's happening at the moment, where communities are effectively demonised, and even schools are being expected to police what's happening in families.
Is it costed the 1.2 billion you're saying?
Yeah, the whole manifesto's costed. The Institute of Fiscal Studies looked at the manifestos of all three parties, and ours is the one that can actually be afforded.
And will Lib Dem stick to their promise? What if they form another coalition government with the Tories?
So we've already said we won't form a coalition.
Oh, you won't?
Okay. Oh yeah, we said that right at the beginning.
That's
I'm on the board that makes the decision. So if it happens next week, it ain't getting past me.
we'll give Ajmol another chance. Yeah,
since the Conservative Party took to power 2010, they've cut 20,000 police officers from our streets. That's despicable. No wonder we have huge rise in crime in our area. Gangs, knife, drugs, absolutely unbelievable. And it's going to get worse. Amber Rudd recently refused to rule out further cuts on police services. Our police officers are crying out for more and more services and more funding, and yet Conservative Party is completely ignoring it. And that's the problem with the upcoming election. I hope that we'll all rise to the challenge and not vote for the Tories, because they will bring more cuts. Our country will be unsafe under them. Our streets will be unsafe as far as I'm concerned. We need more police officers on our streets, but more than that, what we need is community policing. We need people to work together, families, schools, friends, and police officers, to create a trusting relationship where we together combat crimes and the causes of crime.
Just by yourself, why Parliament should listen to you? Just another one independent MP.
Is that a new question?
East End. Well, it's a relevant question, because I understand you have a passion to improve the situation, but what we're probably electorate would like to know how you can make a difference. They have a manifesto. They have a bigger crowd to go as a force to bring about change.
I have a manifesto.
You as a lone wolf, what are you going to do?
Not a lone wolf. You can't say a lone wolf necessarily, but I'll be a very strong voice. I'll tell you my challenge here. My challenge here is that, as we have seen in this borough itself, our existing MP, incumbent, Rushnara Ali, has failed us miserably. We did some deep research and we found 73% of people who contacted her were ignored by her office. She is 2% bottom ranking MPs when it comes to
Sorry,
sponsoring.
who did that study? Like, where do you...
writetoyourmp.com.
Okay.
And you will find that she is ranked as one of the bottom 2% of all MPs put together. And she is second highest expense claiming MP in London. Now, she says she has employed 3 staff, and yet constituents don't find her. She doesn't respond to their queries. She doesn't do any public programs. You know, she has refused to have any hustings, any meetings, any discussions with me or anybody else for that matter. Now, I'm challenging Rushnara Ali. The candidate here for Labour Party is Rushnara Ali. Labour as a party, I have no problem with many of the Labour policies, because I feel many of the things that Labour Party proposes are for social justice, for fairer distribution of wealth.
Let's stick to...
So I am standing for...
So you're saying like you would like to join Labour Party later on?
No,
and
I'm
you
saying
wanna-
something. I'm saying something very simple. I'm
mean,
standing independently.
This is what I really find hard to understand. When even a questioner get lost when they speak to the politicians.
It's important.
So you're saying actually you will look for a platform.
No, I
if
did
you're
say
elected.
that. I said something very simple. I said I'm an
Okay.
independent candidate.
Yes.
I'm challenging Rushnara Ali, the worst performing MP for us in this borough. Even worse than Una King, believe it or not. And many of us actually rose against Una King. Now we've got Rushnara who's performing even worse than that.
I think that...
So hold on. The choice is very simple. In the coming election, even Labour Party members are saying, you know what, we are very upset, but we can't leave our own MP. They're saying this to me with begrudgingly. I would like to give the Labour Party members a very clear option. If you want to see somebody who supports centre-left and left policies, I'm your candidate. If you want to support Jeremy Corbyn and his philosophy that you support, you will find in Rushnara a big enemy, because Rushnara has asked for his resignation and signed no confidence motion twice, and even gone and signed up to a parallel manifesto. I won't do that. I won't be backstabbing Jeremy Corbyn for sure. I'll be backing him in many ways. So I am standing to challenge her, and if I challenge her and if I win, I will support parties on issues and causes that my constituents feel are important to them.
Well, I'm sure some of the Labour Party supporters can convey that message to the MP. I think we'll take another question from the audience. Someone raised their hand. Hold on, we'll just pass the mic. Can someone? Sure.
Tory, Conservative candidate, because I think you deal with other candidate or something. Or
In Poplar and Limehouse.
Yes, and you
do you have a
us.
candidate there? I mean,
Ignore us as a
she's
Poplar and
representing
Limehouse
Bethnal Green and Bow, but I think probably, okay, you can probably still answer because your colleague from...
So my colleague that's standing in Poplar and Limehouse, he's a Conservative candidate and his name is Chris Wilford.
Chris Wilford.
I'm sorry that you haven't received your campaign literature. There is a Conservative presence in Poplar and Limehouse, and I'd like to take this offline with you after this debate to find out where you live and why that hasn't happened. But I can assure you that the Conservatives have a strong presence in Poplar and Limehouse. We have 5 Conservative councillors in Tower Hamlets.
Okay, I think the question, I got the clear.
He does live 100 miles away in
it's
Suffolk
not
Coastal, it might be that.
question. So is there a understanding between the Conservative candidate?
Chris Wilford, so if you did get a leaflet in Poplar and Limehouse, it says that Chris Wilford is a local campaigner from the Conservatives. Chris Wilford actually lives in Suffolk Coastal, which is about 100 miles away from the constituency.
Well, I mean, I think it's unfair to ask that question to you because you're not part of that.
Yes.
So I think just leave that, please. This is not fair.
Yes,
it's best to leave that.
Thank you, Ajmol.
Ask the candidate directly when you see him.
We will move. I think we'll move.
Like ask Rushnara a question. Where is she?
I've got his email address. I'll give it to you.
We'll okay.
I have.
We'll move into next. Any other question from audience? We'll take one more question from audience if anyone wants to ask any question, or we can read one from here. Okay. In Tower Hamlets, drugs play a big part on ASB. What is your view and how do you think the policy on legalizing cannabis will affect Tower Hamlets? This is a question from Papu. Who shall we start? Go on,
Do you want to-
Elaine.
well, I think we're the only ones saying it should be legalised, unless Ajmol has that on his manifesto, so I'm guessing it was for me.
I'm not a Lib Dem candidate. I think you should know that already.
So I think it's a very, very important question. So
Yeah.
you're saying?
So I think, drugs do play a large part in the antisocial behaviour in Tower Hamlets and a number of other crimes. Part of the reason that we've said we would legalise cannabis is to get it out of the hands of the gangs and the drug lords that are causing so much grief to a lot of us. It is at the moment incredibly easy to get hold of. And the other thing that I learnt in the past week is that Tower Hamlets also has the lowest heroin price in the entire country. It's incredibly easy to get your hands on here. And so we want to legalise cannabis, which there is evidence to say that will raise money for the government. It does not do as much harm as some other drugs, and it frees up...
How much harm does it do you know?
So Professor David Nutt wrote a report a number of years ago saying that in terms of classifying drugs, that cannabis should be decriminalised and legalised because you could treat it in the same way as tobacco and alcohol, so you can limit the amount of harm that it does. So what we want to do is free up police time to tackle the harder drugs that drive far more crime, and make sure that we're working with communities around things like antisocial behaviour. One of the things that we want to do is, like I said before, increasing the number of police officers, making sure we've got community officers. From the money that we'd raise with legalising cannabis, we want to invest that in education programmes for young people so that they understand the dangers of what they are often getting involved in. And in general, for antisocial behaviour, actually one of the things that I want to see is the council and our housing associations locally doing far more to tackle this as a problem. So there are a lot of people creating antisocial behaviour who are housing association tenants, and it should affect your tenancy, but at the moment that's not being enforced. And there are a lot of other things that they could do as well, like paying for extra security on estates, which at the moment everyone is just flatly refusing to do. So those are a couple of the things that we'd like to do.
Thank you, Elaine. Shall we go to Ajmol and then Charlie?
Antisocial behavior, drugs misuse, and all of the rest, I think, they're very interrelated.
The question is very specific, actually. It's also about legalizing cannabis.
I've heard your question very clearly.
Good,
So I'm just giving you the answer, but the background is very important. Tower Hamlets is probably one of the most overcrowded social home waiting lists in the country. There are 25,000 people who are waiting on the waiting list for homes. I've been to houses, when I've knocked on the doors, I've seen people, 5, 6 people living in a 2-bedroom house. I've been to one house where it's 1-bedroom house, 4 adult children live in 1 bedroom, all of them adults, and mother and father live in the front room, in the sitting room. When children don't have a comfortable home or a space where they can socialize and be free, they roam the streets. When they're roaming the streets, they're vulnerable, they're open to abuse, open to drugs, etc., etc., and I feel they're all connected. I don't think cannabis should be legalized. I have not seen credible evidence to suggest that it is good for anybody. In fact, it may be good for the coffers, but it's not good for our society. Evidence after evidence from people that I have come across, drugs rehabilitation program centers in Tower Hamlets, all have indicated that cannabis is a slippery slope to harder drugs. It fries your brain very quickly. It makes, it frazzles you completely.
Elaine disagreeing.
That's okay.
Yeah, there are academic studies that state very clearly that that's not true. There is evidence from across Europe that it's not true.
But that's your view. I agree that you have the right to a view, but I'm giving you the alternative, which is that as far as our studies are concerned in Tower Hamlets, with many of the BME children who are badly and disproportionately affected by cannabis use, or misuse for that matter, I think it's very, very dangerous thing to do, and that is to legalize it. There is one point though, medicinal use for cannabis. Just like there is medicinal use for cyanide, which comes from cobra venom, a snake. So everything dangerous or poisonous, of course, can be used in a medicinal environment, under controlled environment, controlled and licensed environment. Cannabis is not one of them. It is a recreational drug. It should not be decriminalized. It should remain a criminal offense, and we need to educate our communities, empower our children, give them safe space to play, and stop the cuts in the borough that is taking away our youth services, increase more social homes so that people can live in comfortable houses. We need to empower parents with better parenting program. It's a holistic approach as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, Ajmol. Thank you. I think we had a question from the audience. Is it Papu you want to ask a question?
Do I need to?
Oh, sorry, Charlie.
I'd just like to say on the issue of cannabis that I think it's a slippery slope for the Liberal Democrats to propose this policy. Cannabis was recently upgraded from a Class C drug to a Class B drug. I think I'm the only one here that actually prosecutes in court day in, day out cannabis users for either possession of cannabis or possession with intent to supply cannabis. And what I can say is, for them to actually legalise it and make it more readily available for them isn't helping anybody. It's actually, as my friend says, I think this is one thing we do agree on, is it does fry brains. And the issues that it leads to in terms of mental health issues and the antisocial behaviour that it causes as well, particularly for young people, along with alcohol-related offences. I think it's a terrible suggestion to legalise cannabis, and I'm not sure how much the Liberal Democrats think they're going to generate from this policy, given that one bag of herbal cannabis costs about £10.
I probably should let Elaine to come back to that if you
Yeah, sure. No, that's fine. I think it's a shame that we talk about our young people in this way, that you legalise cannabis and all of a sudden they're all going to start doing it. It's, you know, there is evidence to show that actually the use of drugs is falling all of the time. One of the things that we want to do is, in terms of the issues that it has for mental health, the drug that causes that has been identified in the plant. So what we would do is limit the amount of that is in what is legally available, in the same way that we do with nicotine in tobacco.
Are you suggesting that we genetically modify cannabis and therefore make it more what's the word? Healthy for you and palatable.
Less harming.
Is that what you're saying?
Less harmful.
So genetically modify cannabis?
No, it's not about genetically modifying it. It can be grown and produced in a way where it's safe. And so we're saying that it's not something that we want to spend a lot of police and government time on in terms of prosecuting for it.
Isn't that what the United Nations did in Afghanistan? Try to genetically modify and alter opium production. And guess what happened? They've got more virulent product of opium growing out of Afghanistan and coming and destroying our country here.
And that's why we're not talking about opium, and we're not suggesting to do that for cannabis.
But I think if you do that with cannabis, the outcome is going to be even more destructive, and we're going to have more children who are going to be walking zombies, and I see them enough on our streets. We need to help them.
So I think you should read the study by David Nutt that sets out very clearly what the evidence is. David Nutt was the drugs advisor employed by the Conservatives and sacked by Theresa May because he said things that weren't too palatable, which is generally her way of doing things.
How do you spell his name? Is it
N-U-T-T.
Oh, it's not N-U-T.
No, we've never talked about legalising heroin. That's ridiculous.
Okay, I think we'll move on. We had a lively...
So, Elaine, would you then, therefore, according to Professor Nutt's own theory, would you propose that we ban alcohol?
So we've always talked about having an evidence-based policy. So it's one of the things that we would look at and assess about. Do you limit the? So one of the problems with alcohol is the volume. So in terms of you buy a bottle of wine and now it's like 15-20%. That's changed significantly in the last decade. So we'd look at actually, is that something that you need to legislate for?
Okay, now...
We're becoming a nanny state with this type of regulation.
Since I initially asked the question...
Oh, sorry, go on, Papu. Yes, come on in.
It was specifically to do with Tower Hamlets and antisocial behaviour. As a youth worker myself, working with young people day to day, I know the effects cannabis has on the streets of Tower Hamlets. So saying that it's not as harmful as anything else is actually, I find it offending, because young people, a lot of them are suffering from things like schizophrenia and hallucination, and it is having social implications with their life and domestically as well. The study shows, the policy itself, when it was introduced, it said it will 95%, the study showed 95% of the street is flooded, in terms of cannabis, is flooded by skunk, which is very addictive and very harmful. But the policy showed that it's not going to be flooding the streets with skunk, but with something much more weaker. And the main point they wanted to introduce this policy is to, number one, stop drug dealers, fair enough, and number two, so the people taking the drug will not lead on to a much more stronger substance.
Using something else.
But if the policy itself says you're going to give a weaker option, how is that going to change from someone who's taking drugs to actually go for something much more
bigger
harmful and much more strong?
harmful? I think we will stop with cannabis here. we need to move on to more relevant issues. One question here from Ruhul Amin, I'll read to the candidates, and hopefully you can keep your answers short. What steps do you plan to take to safeguard citizens in Tower Hamlets? Now, that's where we probably, can you mention two things? One is definitely your manifesto. What's your party policy in it? And personally, what sort of initiative you will take to tackle such issues? As you are aware, I mean, we've had probably within the last couple of months at least 8 stabbing.
13.
Sorry, 13 in just recent month, and it's really going
and
up.
4 in our borough alone.
4 in borough alone. Shall we start from Shirley?
Well, I think your question's in relation to making people safe in Tower Hamlets.
Safer Tower Hamlets, yep.
And particularly free from hate crime offences in Tower Hamlets.
No, not necessarily just hate crime. It's community safety.
Safe
it could be, yes.
Okay, so I think improving community safety is about building community cohesion. And I think the most important thing that we can do as a local politician is listen to all the different groups that we have in Tower Hamlets. There are some brilliant community leaders here that know the borough a lot better than us politicians. They have better connections as well to the local community. It's getting people that are on the forefront of that involved in setting and helping build local policy. And I think it's important to engage on a one-to-one basis with residents. Improving community safety, we've already discussed having community police officers as well. It's also important to have a local MP that will actually reply to your emails. I think that's probably something as well. And to have a local MP that is visible, a local MP that is present at community safety events. I think it's shocking that we're having an event about hate crime and we're in the most diverse borough in London, and our local Labour MP has not bothered to attend. So if I were your MP, I would make community safety, particularly as someone that has an intricate knowledge of the criminal justice system and how community safety can really work, I would use a multi-agency approach in this borough, imploring people from the local council, charities, youth workers, like we've had members of the audience, and getting them to really have their expertise and bring that to a forum whereby we can really improve community safety. I think a lot of as well about knife crime, it's about having one of those days where you say to local people, bring in your knives, bring in your blades, bring in your offensive weapons and surrender them and you won't be charged. It's about getting these offensive weapons off the street, because at the end of the day they are killing people and they shouldn't be walking down.
And you intend to do that with law police officers?
Yeah, I think you can have an amnesty, and I think they've been quite successful in boroughs across London, and you don't need more police officers to do that. You just need an amnesty whereby you say to local people, come in and surrender your knives and weapons and you won't be prosecuted.
Thank you very much. Some of the issues that you've raised, I've mentioned them in my own manifesto, that I would actually be, as an MP, actively leading on creating awareness, campaigning for amnesty, bringing young people. I would actually go ward by ward, inviting young people with police officers to deposit their knives, their weapons, so that they could be completely taken away from them, and more importantly, not criminalize them or not prosecute them. It's very important that young children are given the it's very important that we give our children the idea that carrying a weapon, it doesn't make you stronger. Actually, it makes you weak. It makes you vulnerable. That very weapon could be used on you. When I have a vivid recollection of Jaminur Chowdhury. When we were burying him in the Garden of Peace cemetery the other day, and when we laid his body down in the grave, I felt the coldness of his body in my arm. Young 20-year-old dead because of a knife attack. Random knife attack. Then in Paulin House the other day, another random knife attack. It can't be got rid of unless parents are involved in eradicating it. It can't be got rid of unless youth workers are part and parcel of the solution. It can't be got rid of unless our police officers are together, schools, workshops, seminars. We need to create a huge uproar in our community. Communities need to stand together against knife and crime and guns and violence. It is not acceptable what we see in our society, and I don't think enough is done. And you're absolutely right that our MP not only is shy of responding our emails, she has played no roles in even talking against it in the communities. That's a great shame. An MP should be a champion who should be going to the wards, encouraging people to come together. So I would, if I become an MP, I would work with you, youth workers, work with the parents, work with school teachers, police officers, community safety officers, community leaders, and create a culture where we say no more knives in our borough, no more guns in our borough. That needs to be happening very quickly. And finally, an amnesty for a week or a reasonable period of time where young children know they can deposit their knife or their weapon and not get criminalized as a result.
Thank you, Ajmol. We'll move to Elaine.
Yeah, so I'd agree with both of you, and I think there's a good ways, I guess, in the short term to address what's happening at the moment. One of the issues that we are going to have in Tower Hamlets and in other local authorities is in terms of youth workers. We already don't have a lot of them left, and there are further cuts being made to services. I'd want to see the youth service made a statutory service again, so it has to be delivered, because at the moment it's always one of the first things that is made cuts to. I think for me, it's as well as the short-term stuff we've talked about in terms of more police officers, amnesties and things like that, we need to tackle the reason why so many young people in our community are carrying these knives to begin with. Why is it they feel that they have no kind of place in society and they have no hope in terms of, you know, it being a criminal offence actually isn't a deterrence, because they're like, well, it doesn't really matter because it has no impact on what I want to do anyway. So for me, I think it's more about what we do in terms of education and giving our young people opportunities, so that, you know, Tower Hamlets, we sit with Canary Wharf right in the middle of the borough, and so many of our young people look at it and go, that's not an option for me. I could never go and work there. And so it's making them feel that actually that is an option, and you don't have to be involved in gangs, and you don't need to be carrying knives and getting involved in crime. Actually, you can have hope and you can go out and achieve your full potential, rather than at the moment I just feel that, particularly in this borough, people are made to feel that they're not a full player in society.
There is a glass ceiling in our society, unfortunately.
Yeah, massively.
Just so that we know, the glass ceiling is if you are from black and ethnic minority groups, you can only go so far. Many young people tell me, oh, if I go to Canary Wharf, the best job they're going to give me is a security job. The best job I'm going to get is a cleaner's job. Why would I want to do that? I'm a graduate. Did you know Tower Hamlets has one of the largest, highest graduate unemployment in the country? One of the reasons why this is happening is because we are sandwiched between two of the richest pockets of our country. On one hand, Docklands, the other hand is City. Yeah. If those rich people, and I'm not asking them for their charity, were to throw their loose change in our direction, would be very rich people. We don't want their charity. What we want, and if I'm an MP, I would do this, I would actually bring them together around the table. I would actually lobby them to say, look guys, you've got so much wealth in yourselves. Can you not please create opportunities for our children so they can have work experience, apprenticeship, permanent positions for jobs, etc., mentoring schemes, in order for them to break that glass ceiling. So I agree with you, Elaine, that the root cause is that they don't have hope and they have apathy. They have no youth space. It's being cut. We need to restore all of those things, but that's a longer discussion.
Yeah. Just on the graduate issue, so one of the things that we want to do is introduce name-blind applications. So one of the problems we have in the city in Canary Wharf is you send a CV with John Smith at the top and a CV with Mohammed at the top. John, and they're exactly the same. John will get an interview, Mohammed won't. So that's one of the things that we want to do to tackle that kind of institutional discrimination that there is, sadly, in a lot of our businesses. Sorry, am I jumping the gun?
No, it's all right. We had a question where it says how you're going to tackle institutional racism in Tower Hamlets, given that obviously the assumption is that there is already institutional racism in Tower Hamlets. So let's start from Charlie. So we'll keep it.
I think
Institutional racism, and how do you think locally, if you become an MP, what sort of initiative you'll take and how you're going to tackle it?
Well, I think institutional racism, I think it starts from the top, doesn't it? And I think what you have to look at as, let's take Tower Hamlets Town Hall Council, how many people from the BAME community in that local council are actually sitting in senior positions, the head of children's services? They should be promoted there should be initiatives for young people from the BAME community.
It's a good thing they're not sitting in the children's services head, because it's been badly criticized recently. So it's maybe a good thing.
I know that there are particular issues with children's services in Tower Hamlets, and I understand there has been resignations from the cabinets. But what I do think is it's important that the right opportunities are given to the right people. So firstly, Tower Hamlets Town Council need to lead from the front. They need to show, yes, our doors are open to everybody, people from the BAME community, and then they need to put those people on leadership programs and show this is what we're setting as a precedent, and then the local businesses in the area will follow suit as well. And I think that's the most important thing. I think it's horrible when you look at a town council, and I can say it myself being a local council in Merton, when you just see a load of old white faces at the top. That is not how society should be, and we need to eliminate that.
Thank you. Shall we move to Ajmol? Institutional racism in Tower Hamlets, and how are you going to tackle it?
Institutional racism in Tower Hamlets is actually a long-standing problem we have had. Remember those days when we had various other parties in the council. I remember, and this is not particularly against Lib Dems, but I remember Lib Dems were in control, and my father had lost his house, and he went to the housing department for a house to be housed. And the officer said on the other side, "Do you have a house in Bangladesh?" And my father said, "Yes, I have." He goes, "Then why don't you sell the one in Bangladesh and buy one here?" And I just looked at him thinking, what? And it was actually Lib Dem policy at that time within the council to ask such questions.
Your former party?
Well, yeah, of course. So, of course. Institutional racism goes long way back, and we need to really deal with it. We have had issues within the police offices. We have had issues in the council. The only way we can do this is by having the right councillors who can take the council to task. We need right leadership.
What about working in partnership? I'll quickly jump in. I remember.
We need a good mayor. Hold on 1 second. We need a good mayor. A mayor who is accepted. Recent episodes of what's happened with Sharia. Remember Sharia? I can't believe there's an accusation against the mayor. BBC has reported it, that he's actually intimidated her, bullied her, and discriminated her, and even questioned her about her hijab. We don't need mayors like that. We need a change in this borough. We need transparency, robust leadership, representative leaders. We need good councillors. We need leaders who can account. The council officers, not council officers run rings around our councillors. That's not acceptable.
Is there a lack of coordination? I mean, I remember when the whole Bangladeshi community was very proud when we had our first British Bangladeshi MP, Rusnar Ali. I'm sure they're still proud. And obviously we had Lutfur Rahman as the mayor. And the community imagined that actually now they will really work together, because they have gone through a lot, this community. But unfortunately, those 5-7 years apparently, they didn't have a single meeting together to address or to address issues in the community. Now, that's where when you're saying now we have a mayor, like how you're going to work as an MP, I do not know what are the cooperation between MP and
an MP has the right to sit with the mayor, bring the mayor to account on behalf of the people, to speak on behalf of people, because MP ultimately, just like the mayor has been directly elected, also needs to play that role, a friendly role, a role where he or she is a champion of the people. So if I'm an MP, I would actually have a meeting immediately with John Biggs to ask John, look, I'm one of the MPs in the borough. The other person who is the other MP would need to sit together and work in partnership. More partnership work, the better. The previous ones, I know the ongoing fight between Rushnara and Lutfur Rahman, it dates back about 10-15 years. Look, that's old politics. Let's start afresh. We now have a potential for change. In the upcoming election, either me or Rushnara is going to become the MP. I'm sorry to say this to the other lady and other candidates.
It's all right.
It's going to be a two-horse race between me and Rushnara. I hope I win. If I do, I will work with the council officers, councillors, and the mayor. I will make sure I bring them to task publicly, just like the public have the right to bring me to task for my achievements and my failure.
I thought there is a perception in the community, like if we make someone MP, they're supposed to be in Westminster. We should see them less than, we probably respect them more.
That's a perception. You have just said it. That is a myth. An MP should be a more constituency MP, doing the work of the people than sitting in the lofty tower of the parliament.
Okay, so they should.
I will be here every day with you.
Can I just add
Yes, go on,
on the
Charlie.
end to what my friend just said? If you are going to vote for somebody, and the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats are out of this in Tower Hamlets, and I would vote for this gentleman because he actually bothers to turn up to a debate.
You gonna do the same? I'm just-
Hey, Will's not here. If I tell people not to vote for him, I'll be in trouble next week.
Okay, go on now. Just an option, you know, go.
So in terms of the institutional racism, which is what the question was about, I mean, first of all, the fact that we're still sat here having to discuss it in 2017 with all of the history is incredibly sad. The specific stuff around Sharia, what worries me is that Sharia. Oh, sorry, that's Sharia. Sorry, that's my tiredness slipping in. So I think it's really sad that she felt she had to go to the media to get herself heard, and that there was no support within the council in terms of whistleblowing or anyone else that she could go to in order to make sure that this was dealt with. I think it's terrible that my opponent from the Labour Party and Rushnara have not said anything on it, whether to say no comment or anything at all, considering that she is still a Labour councillor, is terrible. And I guess shows how much they think of it as an issue. So one of the things I'd want to do from my background in at the Financial Services Regulator is make sure that the council has got really strong whistleblowing policies, so that whether you're a councillor, you are someone who is working there, if you are being treated in this way, that there is someone that you can go and talk to and say, this is happening to me and I don't know what to do about it, please help me. So that there is that there. And again, like we've talked about earlier, because it's not just in the council, it's still in the Metropolitan Police, it's in the businesses like we've talked about. I'd want to be working with all of them and trying to make sure that Tower Hamlets becomes a role model for good community work, and also holding the council and Canary Wharf and other local businesses to account for discriminating against our diverse communities if they do.
Thank you, Elaine. I think we've got many comments and questions in our Facebook page, the LBTV question page. Someone saying, Abu Mumin is saying, where is Rushnara? Is doing a May. Well, we're in June now. Mahmudur Rahman Manna saying, I heard Rushnara Ali wasn't invited for this show. It's not true. I actually personally invited her. I got an auto reply, which is working very well. How is Theresa May keeping Britain safe? 3 attacks since she has been in office. May, who goes and sells billions of pounds of arms to Saudi Arabia. Probably we can take this question in terms of what do we think, how actually this particular, I mean, the Tories' position is this, that, you know, we got to do business. This is the industry. Let us sell arms, and we want peace as well. So how do you tackle that?
I think that is a very sad development in our modern world. We have sacrificed ethics, morals, democracy, rule of law for few pennies, pounds and dollars. We claim that we promote democracy across the world, and yet we sell arms to Saudi Arabia. We sell arms to dictators and despots across the globe. This is a disgrace as far as I'm concerned. And it's been the policy of successive government. On one hand, we want to rid the world of terrorism and extremism, but we fuel the fan of hatred and extremism and terrorism globally. And that is something we need to stop. So I'll be calling for an ethical foreign policy approach all the way. I'll be calling for foreign policy should be based on global interest of the entire humanity rather than the interest of a nation state. Because nation state has made you and I sometimes very blind and blinkered to our own immediate space. Can you imagine nuclear arms race? There is a furor over Jeremy Corbyn not saying he's going to press the button. Well, he's doing the right thing. If he presses the button, all of us will be dead. There'll be nobody left on this earth. Anybody who thinks they should be pressing the button, they're insane. If I'm an MP, I'll be calling for scrubbing of Trident. I'll be calling for disarming complete nuclear stockpile from the entire globe, because I think that would be the right step in the right direction. I think what's happened today is the arms industry is too powerful. They lobby our MPs and they hold them hostage, and they make policies that serve them. I want to see an end to war. I want to see more peace in the world, more negotiations, more nation building, more people working together, and it's only through that, Ehtasham, we'll see peace in the world, we'll rid the world of extremism and terrorism. 500,000 people in Syria have died. 500,000. It's a disgrace that we've allowed that to happen. One man wants to stay in power, called Bashar al-Assad. One man. His desire to stay in power, and the rest of the world, ladies and gentlemen, it's a shame that they've done nothing. They've done very little to stop those people from dying. We have seen Palestine rot away for the last 65 years. Their country and their space withered, in fact, swallowed by Israel every day. That's a shame. We have seen illegal settlements across that particular territory. We've seen the world go in flame, while America and Britain turn a blind eye to many of the atrocities and yet preach to the world how democracy should be preached. So if I'm an MP, I'll tell you as loud as I'm saying it here, from the parliament I'll be speaking about ethical foreign policies. I'll be saying extremism and terrorism is fed by unethical foreign policies that we adopt. Of course, there is not a justification for any of those. What we need to do is adopt a more ethical approach and rid the world of all these terrible destructive weapons that we sell to the world.
Thank you, Ajmol. I think you're just about to lose your support from Charlie. Charlie, what's your position on this?
Well, my position is I have visited Riyadh on many occasions, and what I would say about the Saudi culture is actually it's a rich culture, it's strong in its history, and I actually
we should be selling more arms to them.
Enjoy being a part of it. And what I would say is, yes, you might not agree with America and having a special relationship with America, and you might not agree with selling arms to the Saudis, but you cannot stop having a relationship with these people, because the only way that you can make a difference and change a person's mindset is by having an established relationship with them. It's important to have that level of rapport so you can also change the mindset of some of those people. And I think that's what Theresa May's doing with Donald Trump as well.
Donald Trump is very good for a relationship building. I'm asking a question.
We really don't have much time. I'll come back to you.
Do you need to sell arms to have a good relationship?
You've already got her vote anyway, so it's fine.
Well, I haven't quite got my vote. What I said is, out of two people, if the Labour and this gentleman, I said what I said. But back to the question, it's important to have a defence in this country, because it shows that we're a strong country. It shows that we can react to any terrorist events that are
so would you say that current foreign policy and all the security strategy has worked?
I wouldn't
it's
say
working very well.
I wouldn't say it's worked, but I think
so it's not working.
No, I haven't. No, you're putting words into my mouth. I didn't say that it's not working. What I would say is that we need to keep building on it. I think taking us back to the drawing board, ridding ourselves of nuclear weapons
But you've been in government since 2010.
Isn't going to solve anything. We need to show that we're strong, and we need to show, and I hate to say it, we also need to show
we've been doing that. We've been showing that we are strong. We've been bombing countries, and we've been, selling arms. How is that helping us?
On,
you had yesterday 7 people being slaughtered in London Bridge.
Hillary Benn stood up in Parliament and voted
Sorry,
for
who is Hillary Benn?
The Labour MP.
I know who is Hillary Benn. Okay, let's not go into Hillary Benn.
We're talking about.
Let's go to Elaine. She needs to have her chance.
For the bomb strikes in Syria.
Go on.
So no, I don't think you have to trade arms with people to have a relationship with them. So one of the things that we've said in terms of like Brexit and negotiating new trade deals is we'll only enter into we won't enter trade deals with countries that have terrible human rights records and aren't doing anything to address that. So for example, Syria. We wouldn't be trading anything with them at the moment, considering what's happening in that country. We don't want any arms deals with them or with Saudi Arabia either. So one of the things that I would also want to do as the local MP, one of the places where they actually have these arms fairs is the Excel Centre. And this came up, I think, a couple of years ago. So one of the things that I would want to do and work with whoever the colleague in Bethnal Green Bow is to stop those happening in our borough.
You'll have my full support in that.
Thank you.
No arms sales in our borough. Thank you very much. Absolutely.
I know, particularly
not even an exhibition.
No, not even a pamphlet. We don't want any of it. But in terms of trade deals and influencing countries, I think we still have too much of a foreign policy where it's special relationships and it's going on visits and it's holding hands with someone who has said some pretty despicable things about women, and not using our cultural influence and using our trade in order to influence what countries do and how they manage themselves. So, you know, we are able to influence that at the moment as part of the European Union, and I think we should do that.
Thank you, Elaine. I think that answers the question, and we're almost very close to breaking our fast, so we'll probably close. I would like to probably thank the audience. I think we have to close, so we don't have any more time. We have one more question from the audience about local issue. I hope it's not anything controversial because we don't have much time. So
it's never not controversial in Tower Hamlets. That's why it's great living here.
Go on, Mr. Our former speaker, Mr. Khalid Ahmed.
Statement into the BBC. You make statement into the BBC last night or not last night? So do you think it is not enough? Do you think it is not enough for him? About Sharia, he makes statement.
I think we'll just keep the focus on the MP.
Because you mentioned
MP election. We'll just.
3 candidates already mentioned about Hamlet Council and John B.
Thank you that you defended your mayor. We appreciate
thank
that.
you. Yeah.
We'll probably close it. We'll probably close it here, and I'll just give 1 minute chance to the candidates to make a final plea. Probably. We had one more question. Shall I? Do we have time? Okay. One last question from Papu. Go on.
I can hear you.
It's got to do with hate crime, and really on what Theresa May has said on student immigration. We have colleges and universities, and as I said before, I work with a lot of young people, and a lot of them are migrants. And after Brexit, I've seen and experienced, and I also heard stories from young people, you know, with the abuse of hate crime and racism. And Theresa May using student immigration, so international students to come in here and study. We've got one university in Tower Hamlets and many colleges flooded with a lot of international students that are 2 universities. So Theresa May saying that the main factor of the issue of immigration to be because of students. What is your view on that?
That's a very good question which needs comprehensive answers, but you have to be very short if you want to say something about it.
We don't have really a lot of time to answer that. The problem in our country isn't immigration. I think that's a Tory fear-mongering, speaking to UKIP voters. I can see that. And I understand why Theresa May would do that, because she would want to get the UKIP voters. It's far better than having UKIP, that's for sure. So immigration is not a problem. We have an aging population. Our elder population is much higher in number than the younger ones. Very soon we'll have depleting population. In fact, we have negative growth already in population. So we need more immigration to keep our economy going, to keep our farms going, to keep our industries running. So anybody who says we need to control our immigration, yes, that's right, we need to control them, but we need to control them in a way that adds to our economy, grows our economy. So therefore we need to open our doors and bring more migrants in. Otherwise, when I am a pensioner, there'll be nobody to work to keep the economy going. And that's a very fearful prospect I'm living with. Under conservatives, I think this will be a big disaster.
Thank you, Ajmol. Charlie, your comment and your final remark as well.
What I would say is I think that migrants and student migrants contribute to our economy excellently, and I think they have a lot to offer the United Kingdom as well. But I think it's in all parties' manifestos that immigration does need to be controlled, and the reason being is that we're populating at such a rate that our local services can't sustain the current levels of migration. And you've asked for a closing statement from me as well as part of this answer. And my closing statement is people want an MP that will stand up for their rights. And I can tell you that as a criminal defence solicitor and a local councillor, I am committed regardless of your age, gender, background, or any preconceptions that you may have about me, I will do my best to achieve the best possible outcome for the people of Tower Hamlets. I want to work with local businesses in the Whitechapel area. I want to make a commitment to get our housing register down, which, as my friend has said, is currently at 25,000. And I also want to utilise the transport links that our Conservative government with Crossrail 1 have implemented and made Tower Hamlets more accessible. So I will be available to you. I will be an MP that listens to you. I'm a people person, and I make a commitment to you now that if you vote for me, I will stand up for your rights both in Westminster and on local issues which are so important to our community. So thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, Shirley.
And I'd also like to thank my fellow candidates and wish them all the best.
Thank you, Shirley. Elaine, final remarks.
So just in response to your question, I always find it interesting when people that are cutting funding to local services say that they can't cope with immigration. Our issue is not immigration, it's the fact that we don't plan for it, we don't respond to it appropriately, we haven't built enough homes for not just for people here, but people that have moved into the area. That was one of the most frustrating things for me, working really hard to try and get a Remain vote for this first 6 months of last year, where people were angry about the fact that they were living in overcrowded homes, and they should be, but that's not the fault of people that have moved here to make a better life for themselves. It's the fault of councils and governments that have consistently not invested in this area, not invested in things that we really need, like housing. Thank you. On students, we've committed to taking them out of immigration numbers because we don't think that they should be treated in the same way. We want to change the entire rhetoric around immigration. People are not a problem. We should, because of the issues that Ajmol was talking about, we need to encourage immigration. We want to be an open, tolerant and welcoming nation like we have been for so many years before, and not lose that despite the kind of rhetoric that we've had from UKIP and now the Conservatives since they've started working together in this election. In terms of final statement, obviously I'm standing in Poplar and Limehouse. You'll be voting for...
It's all right, let's have the final statement and then probably we've got some
Yeah. Okay, final statement and then your question. Yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Take some more questions. We'll take some more questions later. Yeah, go on.
Okay, so in Bethnal Green Bow, Will Dyer is the candidate. And for Liberal Democrats in general in this election, it is about some of the things I've just talked about. We are concerned and actually quite terrified about the direction of the country since the referendum last year. We are seeing more and more a narrative against immigration, about cutting services, about punishing people for making particular choices about their lifestyle. We want this country to be open, tolerant and united. We want to support multiculturalism. We want to support our diverse communities and make sure that people can achieve their full potential, whatever choices they make in life.
Would you like to say anything on behalf of William Dyer, as probably, because you're, I think, got a comment here, Ansar Ali, saying, how come you have invited Lib Dem candidate from Poplar and Limehouse? I think you missed the first bit of this program, that's why you didn't see. Actually, she's substituting and just covering her colleague. Elaine Bagshaw, okay, that's fine. Yeah, so I think final remarks from Ajmol, and then we'll take like a couple of questions from the audience
from
before we
me
close
is
it.
very simple.
Go
Whenever I go to the doorsteps, when I'm knocking on doors and when I'm speaking to people during my campaign trail, they say something very simple. Will you disappear just like Rushnara did? Would you respond to our emails? Would you do our casework? Can we get in touch with you? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, I will be here, I will work, I will not disappear. In fact, Rushnara promised to do 2 surgeries a month. She has done very few. I am promising 4 surgeries a month. In fact, I'm also exploring possibilities, if I'm successful, of mobile surgeries. So we would bring surgeries to you rather than you need to come to us. I will be here championing your cause, your issues. I'll lobby for you. I'll be a good voice for you in the Parliament. And of course, I'll bring the issues of Parliament in the borough itself. I will be a constituency MP, not a career politician.
Thank you, Ajmol. Okay, final question from our chair. Can you pass the mic if you have, then that'll be... Mic will go.
Over the last few weeks, we have seen some very terrible things taking place in Tower Hamlet, particularly involving Mayor of Tower Hamlet. considering all that, what's went in within the party and obviously in the public arena, do you consider Tower Hamlet mayor fit for purpose anymore?
I think we are going
I think we have to ignore that question because that's not a question we can answer.
We don't want to get sued.
Oh, yeah, we can get sued.
Do you
for
want
this.
mayor to be behaving?
The type of mayor I would like is an accountable mayor, an acceptable mayor,
Fit for purpose, that's what I'm saying.
an approachable mayor, a mayor who people love, a person who loves the people. That's the type of mayor I like. I don't want to talk about the specific one, but I want to see a mayor who works with the people and a mayor who partners with everybody.
Completely agree with that statement, and I'd also like to see a mayor that puts the people's interest before his own.
I think we need to have a mayor that's a role model and works with all communities and is a kind of the leading citizen of the borough.
Okay,
Not like our clown, John Biggs, and what you call Joker. Is the more of a Joker.
One.
How would you work with...
It's fine, yeah.
Just, thank you. How would you work with diverse communities, people who aren't like you? How would you work as an MP to represent all of the people in your constituency? Is that a fair question?
Let's start from Charlie.
Well, I think it's about not seeing any barriers. I think when you work with diverse communities, what you do is you go in and you celebrate different cultures and different practices. You immerse yourself in that culture, and then you do exactly the same with a different diverse community down the road, and you get all of those people together and you celebrate that diversity, because after all, we live in Bethnal Green Bow, and that's what it's all about.
Very, very quickly, Ajmol.
I remember once walking into my workplace and I said to everybody, "Good morning, ethnic majority." And they looked at me saying, "What?" And I hate the word ethnic minority, by the way, because when will we cease to become ethnic minority? I've been here for 45 years. So I want to see that culture change. I would like to treat everyone as equal, as me, as a human being. I don't look at a person, when I look at you, I don't look at you as a woman, I look at you as a human being. My fellow human being, I want to treat you that way. The best way to work with everyone is if you treat them like you as a human being, with respect and honor, you will be able to overcome the barriers and work together with them.
Thank you, Elaine. Final.
So I think it's about working with everyone and treating people as human beings, but it's also about recognizing the very different experiences that we have. So I, as a white woman, will have a very different experience from a white man. I will again have a very different experience from a Bengali woman, and it's about realizing that there are those intersectionalities, there are those very big differences in terms of how diversity crosses over. I'm making sure that a lot of it is just about listening. So coming to more events like this, to some of the other events that I've been to over the past 2 years, and just making sure that you are constantly working with the community, listening to their concerns, and not judging people based on your own very particular experiences.
Thank you, Elaine. I think that will bring it close to this section. I'll just quickly probably say last few words to the TV audiences, just to remind you that we two things. One is that we invited everyone, and this was a program. We are not taking any party political side, and we're not promoting anybody. Roshnara, they're not even declined to come here, but obviously we have all of these people here. And this platform, Campaign Against Racism and Hate Crime, is a community-led campaign. You will find us in Facebook, and probably in future we'll try and probably stand by any victims, or whenever there is issues, we'll try and probably champion those causes. I would like to thank our chair, Mr. Ehtasham Haque, for organizing this. Without him, this wouldn't have been possible. And I'd like to thank all the candidates. Good luck on 8th. And I'd remind all the Bethnal Green Bow residents that do go out and vote. Whoever you like, do go out and express your opinion. Thank you very much. I said just before Iftar, we'll do a 60-second silence for the victims of yesterday's attack. Yeah. So we will take it closer to the